I'm Audrey Parker, 35, standing in the funeral home as my mother's casket gleams under soft lighting. That's when my sister Stephanie's voice cuts through the somber atmosphere. "God, Audrey, couldn't you afford something decent to wear today of all days?" she sneers loudly, eyeing my minimalist black ensemble. The mourners turn uncomfortable. If only she knew that the plain outfit she's mocking is from my own luxury label's latest collection, worth more than her flashy designer knockoff. As founder of Parker Atelier, I could end her mockery with one sentence. Instead, I swallow my response, feeling that familiar childhood pain resurface. Before I dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Whether you're dealing with family drama or building your own success story, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below. Now let's get into how my sister's lifelong pattern of cruelty led to this moment, and what happened when she finally learned the truth. Growing up in our middle-class Boston suburb, my sister Stephanie and I shared a bedroom but lived in different universes. 3 years older and infinitely more favored, Stephanie was the golden child who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. My mother, Margaret, a high school English teacher, kept a meticulous collection of Stephanie's report cards and certificates in a special leather binder. My academic achievements, which often surpassed my sister's, were met with casual acknowledgments like, "Good job, but don't get cocky." Dad Robert coached Stephanie's soccer team and attended every game, but could never seem to make it to any of my art competitions or school exhibitions. "Stephanie just needs more attention," Mom would explain when I'd ask why they missed my school art show to attend Stephanie's routine choir practice. "She's more sensitive than you. You're strong, Audrey. You'll be fine on your own." And I was fine on my own. I had to be. While Stephanie got new clothes each season, I learned to sew and alter thrift store finds. By 13, I could transform an oversized men's button-down into a stylish dress that earned compliments from everyone except my family. "Why do you waste time making those weird clothes?" Stephanie would ask, purposely spilling juice on my sketchbook. "You look like a homeless person playing dress-up." The most painful memory came during my sophomore year when my art teacher entered my fashion design portfolio in a statewide competition. I worked on it for months, staying up late after finishing homework and house chores, which Stephanie was mysteriously exempt from. The night before submission, I left my portfolio on my desk to add final touches in the morning. I woke up to find coffee spilled across my drawings, the pages stuck together and ruined. Stephanie stood in the doorway, feigning shock. "Oops, I was just looking at it and must have knocked my cup over," she said, not even trying to sound sincere. "You did this on purpose," I cried frantically, trying to separate the soaked pages. When our parents came in, Stephanie was already sobbing dramatically. "I was just trying to see her work because I'm so proud of her, and now she's accusing me of ruining it on purpose." "Audrey, apologize to your sister right now," Dad demanded. "She was taking an interest in your hobby and accidents happen." "Hobby?" "This was for a scholarship competition." Mom shook her head. "Well, maybe this is a sign you should focus more on academics like your sister instead of these fashion things." I stayed up all night recreating what I could of my portfolio. It wasn't as good as the original, but it was enough to earn honorable mention. When the certificate arrived in the mail, Mom placed it on the refrigerator, where it stayed for exactly 2 days before being replaced by Stephanie's B+ math test. As we entered high school, the divide grew deeper. I took advanced placement art courses and started a small business altering clothes for classmates. Stephanie spread rumors that I was obsessed with clothes because I was insecure about my looks. The irony was that Stephanie was the one spending our parents' money on designer labels she couldn't even pronounce correctly. The final betrayal came during my senior year when I discovered that the college fund my grandparents had set up for each of us had been emptied, both mine and Stephanie's. My sister had convinced my parents that since she was already in her second year at an expensive private university, she deserved both funds. After all, I was only looking at fashion schools, which my parents considered a waste of money. "You're creative," Dad said dismissively. "You'll figure something out." And so I did, though not in the way any of them expected. With my college fund gone, I deferred my acceptance to Parsons School of Design and spent a year working 3 jobs: mornings at a coffee shop, evenings at a high-end clothing boutique, and weekends assisting a local wedding dress designer. I saved every penny and applied for every scholarship available. When I finally started at Parsons the following fall, I was exhausted but determined. My tiny apartment in New York was more of a closet with a bed, but it was mine. I shared it with 2 other design students, Rachel and May, who became the supportive family I never had. While other students went out partying, I worked at a local tailor shop between classes, learning construction techniques from Mr. Volkov, an elderly Russian immigrant who recognized my hunger to learn. "You have golden hands," he told me, after watching me reconstruct a vintage Dior jacket. "But you need to develop thicker skin to match them." During my second year, I met Barbara Wilson, a visiting professor who had worked with several major fashion houses. After class one day, she pulled me aside. "Your technical skills are impressive, but your designs show something rarer, a point of view," she said, reviewing my portfolio. "Why are you holding back?" I explained that I was trying to create commercially viable pieces that would help me land a job after graduation. She shook her head. "There are thousands of competent designers out there. The industry doesn't need another one. It needs visionaries who can balance creativity with commerce. Stop designing what you think will sell and start creating what only Audrey Parker can imagine." That advice changed everything. I developed a distinctive style combining architectural minimalism with unexpected textural elements. My senior collection featured monochromatic pieces with intricate hidden details, a metaphor for how I'd learned to conceal my emotions while preserving my authentic self beneath the surface. The collection caught attention, and I was invited to showcase at a small but influential graduate exhibition. 2 days before the show, Stephanie showed up unannounced at my apartment with our parents. "Surprise, we thought we'd support your little fashion show," she announced with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was dressed in head-to-toe designer labels, all flashy logos and no substance. During the exhibition, while other families photographed their children's work with pride, Stephanie loudly critiqued my collection within earshot of industry attendees. "It's all so basic," she declared, examining a precisely tailored jacket with hand-embroidered lining. "Anyone could make this." "And black again, so depressing and unoriginal." Mom nodded along while Dad checked his watch repeatedly. They left before the judges announced that I'd won the exhibition's Emerging Designer Award, which included an internship at Ellington Design House. The internship led to a junior designer position where I worked grueling hours bringing other designers' visions to life. I was making progress, earning respect from my colleagues when Stephanie struck again. She had moved to New York with her new husband James, a finance executive, and made it her mission to check on my struggling career, as she called it. Somehow, she managed to befriend the wife of Ellington's creative director at a charity event. A week later, I was called into the director's office. "I heard some concerning things about you," he said, without preamble. "That you've been sharing company designs with competitors. That you have substance abuse issues affecting your work." I was stunned. "None of that is true. Who told you this?" "It doesn't matter. We can't risk our reputation on someone with questionable ethics." I was fired that day, and the fashion industry's rumor mill made sure no other major house would hire me. Later, I discovered that Stephanie had orchestrated the whole thing, telling people I was unstable and desperate for success at any cost. Meanwhile, Mom's health had begun to decline, the early stages of the illness that would eventually take her life. During a rare phone call, I heard Stephanie in the background. "Don't worry, I'll handle Audrey's portion of your care. She can barely take care of herself with that failing fashion career." That was the moment I decided to cut all ties and forge my own path. Barbara Wilson, who had become a mentor, helped me secure a position at a smaller design collective where I could rebuild my reputation. Sometimes, Barbara told me you have to step away from what's poisoning you before you can create something pure. The next day, I changed my phone number, moved to a different apartment, and began plotting the creation of my own brand, one that would eventually silence all the doubts and mockery once and for all. With less than $2,000 in savings, I moved into a converted warehouse space in Brooklyn that served as both my tiny studio apartment and workshop. The building had inconsistent heat and a shared bathroom, but the large windows provided perfect natural light for designing. I spent my days working as a pattern maker for a small manufacturing company and my nights developing my own collection. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My hands were constantly raw from hand sewing samples, and I survived mostly on instant ramen and coffee. The vision for Parker Atelier, named using my middle name to maintain personal privacy, emerged during those sleepless nights. While other designers chased trends, I focused on creating timeless pieces with impeccable construction and subtle, meaningful details. Each garment would tell a story through its craftsmanship rather than flashy logos. 3 months in, my old roommate Rachel Thompson tracked me down. After graduating, she had gone into fashion, marketing, and business development. "You disappeared," she said, surveying my sparse living conditions. "I've been worried." I showed her my sketches and the few samples I had completed. "This is extraordinary," she said, examining the seams of a precisely tailored jacket. "But you need capital to launch a proper collection." Rachel became my business partner that night. She created a business plan and arranged meetings with potential investors while I refined my designs and sourced ethical materials. Our first investor meeting was disastrous. 5 middle-aged men in suits barely glanced at my samples before dismissing the concept. Minimalist luxury. "That's an oxymoron," one said. Luxury customers want recognizable brands. They want to show off what they paid for. The second, third, and fourth meetings went similarly. But Rachel refused to give up. "We're pitching to the wrong people," she realized. "We need investors who understand that true luxury isn't about broadcasting wealth, it's about quality that speaks for itself." She arranged a meeting with Diane Foster, a former fashion editor turned venture capitalist who specialized in emerging design talent. "I've seen 1,000 designers with unique visions," Diane said bluntly. "What makes Parker Atelier different?" I handed her my signature piece, a black jacket with architectural shoulders and a seemingly simple silhouette. "Try it on." When she slipped it on, her posture immediately changed. The precise tailoring created a perfect fit without any alterations. "Now look inside," I instructed. The lining revealed hand-embroidered text, quotes about female strength and resilience that were invisible from the outside. "Every piece tells a story that only the wearer knows," I explained. True luxury isn't about impressing others, it's about how something makes you feel. Diane invested $50,000 that day, enough to produce a small collection and create a basic website. The first production run almost ruined us. The factory delivered pieces with inconsistent stitching and poor fabric quality. I rejected the entire order and spent our remaining funds finding an ethical manufacturer with higher standards, even though it meant cutting our projected inventory by half. "We can't compromise on quality," I insisted when Rachel worried about the numbers. "Not when quality is our entire brand promise." We launched with just 15 pieces, 5 styles in 3 sizes each, and a simple online store. Sales trickled in slowly, mostly from Rachel's marketing connections. For the first 3 months, we barely covered production costs. Then came our unexpected break. A stylist for actress Gabrielle Winters borrowed our signature jacket for a magazine interview. In the published article, Gabrielle specifically mentioned how the jacket made her feel powerful but not aggressive, polished but not stuffy. Orders quadrupled overnight. Still, we remained relatively unknown outside certain fashion circles, exactly as I preferred it. I deliberately kept my identity as the founder private, using the Parker Atelier team in all communications and letting Rachel handle press inquiries. My anonymity wasn't just about avoiding my sister's inevitable sabotage. It was about letting the clothes speak for themselves without the distraction of a designer personality cult. Parker Atelier wasn't about me, it was about making women feel confidently themselves. As we expanded production and hired our first employees, I established one firm rule: we would never compromise quality for growth. While other brands rushed to capitalize on trends, we focused on perfecting a limited collection of pieces that would stand the test of time. This philosophy, initially mocked by industry insiders as commercial suicide, eventually became our greatest strength. In a world of fast fashion and constant consumption, Parker Atelier became known for its integrity and restrained elegance. By the end of our second year, I had moved into a modest but comfortable apartment, though I still spent most of my time at our studio. The business was growing, and with each collection, I felt myself healing from years of family trauma, creating something beautiful from the pain of never being enough. What I didn't know was that soon I would be forced to confront that pain directly as my mother's health began a final steep decline. Number. Part 5. Rise to Success. While family remains oblivious. The third year of Parker Atelier brought unexpected momentum. What started as whispers among fashion insiders grew louder when Vogue featured our collection in their Designers to Watch spread. The minimalist aesthetic I'd been mocked for throughout my life was now being hailed as refreshingly authentic and a palate cleanser in an era of excess. We expanded from our initial focus on outerwear to a complete wardrobe collection, each piece designed to work seamlessly with the others. Our business model challenged fashion conventions by rejecting seasonal collections in favor of a curated, evolving line of core pieces that could be updated and refined rather than discarded. "You're not just selling clothes," Rachel observed during a late night at the studio. "You're selling a philosophy." She wasn't wrong. Parker Atelier had become my response to a lifetime of being told I wasn't enough, too plain, too serious, too focused on substance over flash. Our customers weren't buying status. They were investing in quality and intentionality. With growing demand, we opened our first flagship store in Soho, a space as thoughtfully designed as our clothing. No flashy displays or overwhelming options, just carefully considered pieces presented in a gallery-like setting. The dressing rooms featured lighting that could be adjusted to simulate different environments: office lighting, evening light, natural daylight, so customers could see how the garments would perform in real life. The Fashion Critics Association nominated Parker Atelier for the Emerging Luxury Brand Award, which we won, though I sent Rachel to accept it on behalf of the team. My photo appeared nowhere on our website or marketing materials. When fashion blogs speculated about the mysterious designer behind the brand, we neither confirmed nor denied any theories. This privacy became increasingly important as we expanded internationally with a second store in London and our collection being carried by select high-end retailers worldwide. The business now employed 37 people, all of whom respected my desire for anonymity. To the world, Parker Atelier had been founded by a collective of designers focused on redefining luxury, a convenient fiction that allowed me to separate my personal and professional lives. Throughout this ascent, I maintained minimal contact with my family, occasional brief calls with my mother, usually when Stephanie wasn't around. During one such call, Mom mentioned that she had seen a brand called Parker, something in a magazine. The designs reminded me of those sketches you used to make, she said. A rare acknowledgement of my creative pursuits. Are you still doing anything with fashion? I hesitated before answering carefully. I work in the industry, yes. That's nice, dear. Stephanie just bought a vacation home in the Hamptons. James's business is doing so well. The conversation shifted back to Stephanie's achievements as it always did. Though Mom never said it directly, I gathered through these brief communications that Stephanie continued to portray me as barely scraping by in New York's fashion scene, possibly working retail or as a seamstress. She seemed to derive satisfaction from positioning herself as the successful daughter who had tried to help poor Audrey find her way. The truth was that Parker Atelier's revenue had surpassed $20 million the previous year. My personal net worth now exceeded that of Stephanie and her husband combined, though I lived relatively modestly, investing most profits back into the company and our manufacturing partners. During another call, Mom's voice sounded weaker. The doctors say I should get my affairs in order, she mentioned casually, as though discussing grocery shopping. Would you be able to visit soon? I had avoided returning home for years, but the finality in her tone couldn't be ignored. I'll see what I can arrange, I promised already, dreading the inevitable family dynamics. 2 days later, while I was reviewing fabric samples for our next collection, my father called something that had happened perhaps twice in the past 5 years. Your mother would like to see you, he said, without greeting. Stephanie says you're too busy with your shop job to visit, but surely you can make time now. The dismissive way he referenced my career, one he knew nothing about, stung even after all these years. I'll be there next weekend, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. After hanging up, I sat staring at the wall of my office, an office that overlooked Madison Avenue and housed a team of dedicated professionals bringing my vision to life. The contrast between my reality and my family's perception was so vast, it would have been comical if it weren't so painful. Are you okay? Rachel asked, finding me still sitting there an hour later. My mother is dying, I said, and I have to go home and pretend to be less than I am to keep the peace. Rachel frowned. Why not just tell them the truth? You've built something extraordinary. Most people would be shouting that from the rooftops. I shook my head. You don't understand my sister. The moment she knows Parker Atelier is mine, she'll find a way to either take credit for my success or try to destroy it. She always has. What I didn't admit even to Rachel was a deeper fear that even knowing the truth, my family might still find a way to dismiss my achievements. That no success would ever be enough to make them see me. As I packed for the trip home, I carefully selected pieces from our collection that wouldn't be immediately recognizable, the more subtle designs without our signature hardware or distinctive silhouettes. I would return as Audrey, the less successful daughter, not as the founder of Parker Atelier. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent years creating clothes that made women feel confidently themselves, while I was about to dress in a way that deliberately diminished my own identity. The Uber dropped me off at my parents' colonial-style house in Lexington, Massachusetts, the same house where I'd grown up, though it seemed smaller now. The garden my mother once tended meticulously showed signs of neglect with overgrown hedges and withered flowers. Before I could ring the doorbell, the front door swung open to reveal Stephanie dressed in a bright red designer dress with prominent logos on the hardware, exactly the kind of obvious status signaling that Parker Atelier rejected. Well, look who finally made time for family, she said, giving me an air kiss that didn't come close to my cheek. Her eyes scanned my outfit, a simple cashmere sweater and perfectly tailored trousers from our core collection, which retailed for nearly $2,000, but looked understated to the untrained eye. Still wearing those plain clothes, I see, she remarked. Some things never change. I bit back a response about the difference between simple and simplistic as I entered the house. The living room had been rearranged to accommodate a hospital bed where Mom rested, looking frailer than I had prepared myself for. Dad sat beside her, his face more lined than I remembered. "Audrey's here," Stephanie announced, loudly, as though Mom might not recognize me. Mom's eyes opened and a faint smile crossed her face. "You came," she said softly. "Of course I did." I moved to her side and gently took her hand. "We're having a special dinner," Stephanie declared. "James will be joining us after his conference call. He's closing a massive deal." She emphasized the word massive while glancing at me, clearly trying to establish the pecking order early. During dinner, which had been catered rather than cooked by Stephanie, despite her claims of slaving away in the kitchen all day, the conversation revolved almost exclusively around Stephanie's life, her successful real estate business, selling luxury homes, their recent vacation to Bali, the charity gala she had co-chaired. "We just bought the most adorable vacation house in the Hamptons," she gushed, pulling out her phone to show photos of a sprawling waterfront property. "It was featured in Architectural Digest last year when the previous owners had it. Cost us a fortune, but James says I deserve it." James, a tall man with perpetually tired eyes, offered me a sympathetic smile across the table. "And what about you, Audrey, still working in fashion?" Before I could answer, Stephanie jumped in. "Audrey works at some little boutique in New York." "What's it called again?" "Something artsy and pretentious." "I work for a design house," I said carefully. "In product development." "That's nice," Dad said dismissively. "Stephanie just sold a penthouse to that basketball player." "What's his name, honey?" "Derek William Stephanie preened." $7 million. "Highest commission I've ever earned." I nodded and took a sip of wine. $7 million was approximately what Parker Atelier had donated to fashion education scholarships the previous year, but I kept that to myself. "How are you affording New York these days?" Stephanie asked, with feigned concern. "Those boutique jobs can't pay much. James and I could help you find something in a safer neighborhood if you want." "I'm managing fine," I replied. "The company is doing well." Mom, who had been quiet throughout the meal, suddenly spoke up. "I saw your company in a magazine recently." My heart stopped. "What company?" "Parker," something she said, her eyes clearer than they had been all evening. "It wasn't named after you, was it?" Stephanie laughed. "Mom, Audrey works retail. She doesn't own a company." I met my mother's gaze and saw something unexpected, their knowing look. "Parker is my middle name," I said carefully. "I remember," Mom replied. "You always said you'd use it if you ever started your own line." Stephanie rolled her eyes. "Mom, you're confusing Audrey with someone successful. Remember, she's the one who makes alterations or whatever at that little shop." The conversation moved on, but later, when everyone else had gone to bed, Mom asked me to sit with her a while. "I know more than they think I do," she said softly when we were alone. "I've kept every magazine that mentions your company." I stared at her in shock. "How long have you known?" "Since I saw your signature detail on a jacket in Vogue 3 years ago. That little hidden pocket with the embroidered quote inside you used to put those in the clothes you made in high school." Tears filled my eyes. "Why didn't you say anything?" She squeezed my hand weakly. "I was proud, but afraid to mention it. Your father and Stephanie. They've always been threatened by your talent. I was too weak to stand up to them to acknowledge how special you are." "Why are you telling me now?" I asked. "Because I'm running out of time to fix my mistakes," she whispered. "And because you deserve to know that at least one person in this family recognizes what you've built." It was the closest thing to an apology or acknowledgement I'd ever received from her. When I left her room that night, I felt a complex mix of emotions, grief for the relationship we might have had, anger at the years of silence, and a small measure of peace knowing that she had seen me after all. The next morning, I found Stephanie going through Mom's jewelry box. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Just organizing things," she said defensively, though I noticed she'd already put several pieces in her purse. Someone needs to take inventory. While Mom is still alive, don't be dramatic, Audrey. Mom told me I could have these pieces ages ago. Unlike some people, I've been here taking care of her while you've been playing dress-up in New York. I bit my tongue knowing this wasn't the time for confrontation. But as the weekend progressed, I witnessed more of Stephanie's behavior using Mom's credit card for emergency shopping trips, making medical decisions without consulting anyone, and constantly reminding everyone of her sacrifices. On my last day, Dad pulled me aside. "Your sister has been a godsend during your mother's illness," he said sternly. "I hope you appreciate everything she's doing while you're off in New York." I looked at him, this man who had never seen me clearly. "I'm glad Stephanie has been able to help," I said carefully. "I've offered to contribute financially to Mom's care several times, and Stephanie said it wasn't necessary." He frowned. "Well, of course it's necessary. Medical bills aren't cheap." But Stephanie said, "You're barely making ends meet yourself, so she didn't want to burden you." Another lie from my sister. I had offered to pay for private nursing, better medical equipment, anything that would make Mom more comfortable. Stephanie had always declined, saying they had it covered. As I prepared to leave, Mom asked for a private moment. "Next time you visit," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "bring me something you designed. I want to wear Parker Atelier before I go." I kissed her forehead throat tight with emotion. "I promise." On the train back to New York, I made two decisions. First, I would send a private nurse to care for Mom, someone who would report directly to me about her condition and needs. Second, I would design something special for her, a final gift that embodied everything I'd never been able to say. What I didn't realize then was how little time we had left, and how Stephanie would use even our mother's final days to drive her agenda of superiority and control. Within a week of my visit, Mom's condition deteriorated sharply. The cancer had spread more aggressively than doctors initially predicted, and what had been estimated as months became weeks. I rearranged my schedule at Parker Atelier, delegating critical decisions to Rachel while maintaining daily video conferences from a temporary office I set up in Boston, just 15 minutes from my parents' house. Balancing the demands of a growing international brand with daily hospital visits created a punishing schedule. I would arrive at the hospital at 7 each morning, work remotely from Mom's room, until Stephanie arrived around 11, never earlier, despite her claims of round-the-clock care, then return in the evening after Steph left for her essential social engagements. The nursing staff quickly figured out the family dynamics. "Your mother lights up when you arrive," confided Nurse Martinez during my third week. "She saves her energy for your visits." Meanwhile, Stephanie's social media told a different story than reality. Her Instagram became a carefully curated display of devoted daughter moments, artfully filtered photos of her holding Mom's hand, captions about the exhausting emotional journey and sacrificing everything to be by Mom's side. The timestamps on these posts often coincided with times she was actually at lunch with friends or shopping, leaving her 30-minute hospital visits to do the heavy lifting of her public image. One afternoon, I arrived early to find Mom alone trying to reach a cup of water on her bedside table. Stephanie had posted just 15 minutes earlier about another day of providing comfort and care with a photo of Mom sleeping. "Where's Stephanie?" I asked, helping Mom with her water. "She just stopped by to take a few pictures," Mom said weakly. "Said she had an important client meeting." Later that week, while helping Mom organize her personal items, I discovered her credit card statements. Alongside legitimate medical expenses were charges for Stephanie's hair, salon appointments, designer, clothing, and expensive restaurants, all during the period she claimed to be too busy caring for Mom to work. When I confronted her in the hospital hallway, she was indignant. "How dare you go through Mom's private papers? I have permission to use her card for expenses related to her care." Since when is a $2,000 shopping spree at Neiman Marcus related to her care? I countered. I need to look presentable when meeting with her doctors and handling her affairs, she snapped. Not that you would understand professional appearance standards. Before I could respond, Dad appeared, immediately taking Stephanie's side. Your sister has been managing everything while you've been in New York playing with fabric swatches. If she needs to use your mother's card occasionally, that's between them. Have you actually looked at the statements? I asked him. She's spent over $15,000 on herself in the last month alone. Dad waved dismissively. I trust Stephanie's judgment. That night, I called Rachel from my hotel room. I need to know our exact financial position right now, I told her, and how quickly we can liquidate some of my personal investments. The next day, I arranged for Jessica Phillips, a private nurse with oncology experience, to join Mom's care team. I paid privately, not informing Stephanie or Dad until Jessica was already installed and introducing herself as the specialist Audrey has arranged. Stephanie was livid. We don't need some overpriced babysitter, she hissed when she cornered me in the hospital cafeteria. The regular nurses are perfectly adequate. Jessica will be there during hours when neither of us can be present, I explained calmly. She'll ensure Mom gets consistent care. This is just another example of you swooping in at the last minute trying to play hero, Stephanie accused. Where were you for the last 3 years while I've been handling everything? I bit back the truth that I'd offered help repeatedly, only to be rebuffed, and simply said, I'm here now. The unexpected development came that afternoon when I returned to Mom's room to find one of the regular nurses, Heather, excitedly showing Mom a fashion magazine. I knew I recognized your daughter from somewhere, Heather was saying. She's wearing Parker Atelier in this hospital photo. My sister has been saving for months to buy one of their jackets. Mom smiled weakly, catching my eye as I entered. Audrey has excellent taste, she said carefully. After Heather left, Mom gestured for me to come closer. You almost got found out, she whispered, a hint of amusement in her tired eyes. Would that be so terrible? I asked. No, she admitted. But I understand why you keep it private. Stephanie would never let you hear the end of it either way. Either way. She'd either claim she always supported your little hobby, or she'd find some way to diminish it, Mom said. I've enabled her for too long, Audrey. I see that now. Her clarity surprised me. Why did you always favor her? The question had burned in me for decades. Mom was quiet for a long moment. She demanded it in a way you never did. You were always so self-sufficient, even as a child. Stephanie needed constant reassurance. She paused, struggling for breath. It wasn't fair to you. I knew you were hurting, but addressing it would have meant confronting my own weakness as a mother. This unexpected honesty created a fragile bridge between us in her final weeks. During our quiet morning hours together, she asked about my work, genuinely listening as I explained our ethical manufacturing practices and design philosophy. She confessed to secretly following Parker Atelier online, proud but afraid to acknowledge it around Stephanie and Dad. Your sister went through a phase of throwing away fashion magazines if they featured your brand, she revealed. She'd say they were promoting unrealistic minimalism or some other excuse. Jessica, the private nurse, became an unexpected ally. Beyond providing excellent medical care, she created a buffer between Stephanie's chaos and Mom's need for peace. She also kept me informed about concerning behavior when I wasn't present. Your sister tried to adjust your mother's medication schedule yesterday, Jessica reported during our 3rd week. When I explained that altering the timing could reduce effectiveness, she said she knew better than some hourly employee. More disturbing was Jessica's observation that Stephanie often told Mom upsetting stories or brought up contentious family history when Mom was alone and vulnerable, leaving her agitated and exhausted before my evening visits. It's almost like she's deliberately trying to use up your mother's energy before you arrive, Jessica noted. And she asks a lot of questions about your work and life in New York when I'm in the room. Very pointed questions. I suspected Stephanie was fishing for information, perhaps sensing there was more to my career than I'd revealed. Her probing intensified after the magazine incident with casual remarks about discount fashion brands and pretending to be successful whenever I wore anything remotely professional to the hospital. During what would turn out to be Mom's final week, she asked to speak with me alone one evening. Stephanie had left early for a charity gala, and Dad had gone home to rest. "There's a box in my closet," Mom said, her voice barely audible. "Blue hat box on the top shelf. Bring it to me, please." When I returned with the box, she had me open it. Inside were dozens of magazine clippings, business features, and fashion articles about Parker Atelier going back to our very first mention in a small industry publication. "You kept all these," I whispered, thumbing through the collection. "I've followed every step," she said. "Your first store opening, the British Fashion Council nomination, the Forbes profile on anonymous founders." Her hand trembled as she pointed to one clipping. "This one mentioned your commitment to sustainable production." I was so proud. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "At first, I wasn't completely sure it was you," she admitted. "Then, when I was certain, I realized that you'd kept it secret for a reason. I thought it might be because of us, because of how we failed to support you." Her eyes filled with tears. Was I right? I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. "I want you to know that I found my strength too late," she whispered. "But you found yours right on time." She pressed a small object into my palm, her mother's ring, a simple band I'd always admired. "Promise me you'll stop hiding who you are, Audrey. Not right away if you're not ready, but someday soon." 2 days later, she slipped into a coma. 3 days after that, with Jessica, Dad, Stephanie, and me at her bedside, she took her last breath. In her final conscious moment, she had squeezed my hand and whispered, "The black dress," for the funeral. It took me a moment to realize she was requesting to be buried in the Parker Atelier dress. I'd promised to bring her one she would now never wear in life. As we left the hospital room, Stephanie was already on her phone, telling someone how she'd been there every moment and sacrificed everything during Mom's final days. Looking at her, I finally understood what Mom had been trying to tell me. Stephanie's need to diminish others came from a place of profound insecurity, one that no amount of external validation would ever fill. I felt something shift inside me, not forgiveness exactly, but a different kind of clarity. I had built Parker Atelier partly to prove my worth to a family that had never seen it. But its true value lay in how it had helped me find myself beyond their limited perception. Mom's funeral would be my final performance as the lesser daughter. After that, one way or another, the truth would come out. The day after Mom died, Stephanie took charge of the funeral arrangements with militant efficiency. She and Dad convened at the funeral home without inviting me, selecting an elaborate mahogany casket with gold fittings that looked nothing like something Mom would have wanted. "We've chosen the Eternal Radiance package," Stephanie informed me by text, attaching a photo of a contract with a $32,000 price tag. "Since you're between jobs, we understand if you can't contribute much. James and I will cover the majority." When I arrived at the funeral home the next morning, the director, Mr. Hayward, greeted me with practiced sympathy. "Your sister has made most of the arrangements already. Very comprehensive selections." "Can I see what's been planned?" I asked. He showed me a file containing choices for everything from the memorial program, heavy cardstock with metallic ink, to the flower arrangements imported white orchids. None of it reflected Mom's understated tastes or her love of simple, natural beauty. "Did my mother leave any instructions for her funeral?" I asked. Mr. Hayward hesitated. She did actually complete our pre-planning questionnaire during her first rounds of treatment. But your sister indicated those were outdated preferences. I'd like to see that questionnaire, please. Minutes later, reading Mom's handwritten wishes, I felt a painful constriction in my chest. She had requested a simple service wildflowers instead of formal arrangements and donations to the local Arts Education Foundation in lieu of flowers. She had even specified a favorite poet whose work should be read. None of these wishes were reflected in Stephanie's plans, which seemed designed to showcase wealth and ostentation rather than honor Mom's life. When I called Stephanie, her response was dismissive. Those forms were from years ago before she understood what a proper send-off should look like. I know what Mom would have wanted now. By proper, you mean expensive, I challenged. She specifically requested simple wildflowers, not $5,000 worth of imported orchids. This isn't about money, Stephanie snapped, though we both knew it was. This is about honoring Mom with the best of everything, something you wouldn't understand with your modest means. That evening, Dad sided with Stephanie as usual. Your sister has put a lot of thought into this. Let's not create drama at such a difficult time. I retreated to my hotel room feeling the familiar frustration of being overruled and dismissed. But something had changed. I was no longer the insecure girl desperate for family approval. I was a successful businesswoman who made decisions affecting dozens of employees and millions in revenue every day. The next morning, I returned to the funeral home alone and spoke with Mr. Hayward privately. I'd like to make some adjustments to honor my mother's documented wishes, I said, showing him Mom's original requests. I'll cover any cancellation fees for the changes. I replaced the imported orchids with arrangements of local wildflowers, canceled the gold-trimmed memorial booklets in favor of simple programs featuring Mom's favorite poem, and arranged for donation information for the Arts Foundation to be included. I kept the expensive casket. Stephanie had chosen a battle not worth fighting, but added a custom liner made of silk from Parker Atelier's sustainable supply chain. Most importantly, I delivered the black dress I had designed specifically for Mom, an elegant, understated piece with her favorite Emily Dickinson quote embroidered inside near the heart. Mr. Hayward promised to ensure the mortuary staff used it for her burial. When Stephanie discovered the changes the next day, her reaction was nuclear. She burst into my hotel room, unannounced face contorted with rage. "How dare you go behind my back and change my arrangements?" she shouted. "You have no right." "They were Mom's arrangements, not yours," I replied calmly. "I have her signed preferences right here." "Those were outdated. She told me she wanted something more elaborate." "When exactly did she tell you that between which rounds of morphine?" Stephanie's face flushed. "You swoop in during the last few weeks, after I've spent years caring for her, and suddenly you're the expert on what Mom wanted." I held up the file of magazine clippings Mom had kept. "Did you know she collected these? Every mention of Parker Atelier since we launched?" Stephanie glanced at them dismissively. "What does some random fashion brand have to do with anything?" I almost told her then, but something held me back. Nothing. Just pointing out there were many things about Mom you didn't know. After Stephanie stormed out, Jessica, who had become a friend, as well as Mom's nurse, called to check on me. "Your mother talked about you constantly when you weren't there," she revealed. "She kept a box of clippings about your company under her bed that she'd show me when Stephanie wasn't around." "What exactly did she say?" I asked, needing to hear it. "She said you were the strongest person she'd ever known, that you'd built something remarkable without any support from your family. She regretted not standing up for you when you were younger." Jessica paused. "The night before she slipped into the coma, she made me promise to tell you something if she didn't get the chance." "What was it?" "She said, 'Tell Audrey that hiding her light didn't protect her, it only protected us from facing our own failures. Tell her it's time to shine.'" The night before the funeral, I received an unexpected visitor at my hotel, James Stephanie's husband. "Can we talk?" he asked, looking uncomfortable in the hallway. Inside my room, he paced awkwardly before speaking. I wanted to apologize for Stephanie's behavior. Not just recently, but all of it. "You don't need to apologize for her," I said. "I know. But I want you to know that I've always known who you are." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of his sister wearing one of our signature blazers. My sister works in fashion publishing. She figured it out years ago. I stared at him. "You've known all this time?" He nodded. "I've tried to suggest to Stephanie that she should research your company, but she's convinced you're barely surviving in New York. The thought that you might be more successful than she is, it's not something she can process." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because tomorrow's going to be difficult enough without this secret hanging over everything. And because your mother asked me to look out for you in her own way." He reached into his pocket and handed me a sealed envelope. "She gave this to me last month, made me promise not to tell Stephanie about it." Inside was a short note in Mom's shaky handwriting. "Audrey, I'm so proud of the woman and designer you've become. Wear something you created to my funeral. Let the world see what I was too afraid to celebrate. Love, Mom." After James left, I opened the garment bag I'd brought from New York. Inside was the outfit I'd originally planned to wear, one of our simpler designs that wouldn't draw attention. Now, I replaced it with a different ensemble one from our latest collection that had been featured in major fashion publications. It wasn't flashy or ostentatious, but its architectural precision and quality were unmistakable to anyone with knowledge of high-end fashion. It was time to honor Mom's last wish. Tomorrow, I would no longer hide. The morning of the funeral dawned with appropriate gloom-overcast skies, threatening rain that never quite materialized, as if the weather itself were in mourning. I spent extra time preparing, not out of vanity but intention. Every choice felt weighted with significance: my carefully tailored black dress with its distinctive silhouette, the precisely cut jacket with our signature hidden pocket detail, and a simple silver pin Parker Atelier's understated logo on the lapel. The outfit wasn't flashy, but to anyone familiar with contemporary fashion, its quality and design would be unmistakable. I wasn't wearing a brand. I was wearing my life's work, the physical manifestation of everything I'd overcome. When I arrived at the funeral home for the private family viewing before the service, Stephanie was already directing staff about final details, dressed in an aggressively designer outfit, logos visible on every accessory, the kind of conspicuous consumption that screamed insecurity. She barely glanced at me until I approached the casket to see Mom. Then her eyes narrowed, taking in my outfit with a quick dismissive scan that missed its significance entirely. "At least you made an effort today," she said with faint approval, misreading my understated elegance as simplicity. "Though you might have added some jewelry or something to elevate the look." I said nothing, focusing instead on Mom. They had used the dress I'd designed for her, and she looked peaceful, the fabric draping perfectly as I'd intended. I slipped a small bouquet of forget-me-nots, her favorite flower, into her hands before stepping away. The service itself was beautiful in its simplicity, a testament to Mom's actual preferences rather than Stephanie's theatrical production. Several of Mom's longtime friends approached me afterward, commenting on how the service reflected her true nature. "Margaret would have loved this," said Eleanor Griffin, Mom's friend of 30 years. "She always preferred meaningful over showy." She paused, looking at my outfit with more discerning eyes than Stephanie had. "That jacket, it's exquisite. Parker Atelier, isn't it? I've been coveting their pieces for years but haven't managed to get off the wait list yet." Before I could respond, Stephanie materialized beside us. "Audrey works at some little boutique in New York," she interjected with a patronizing smile. "She probably got an employee discount on a sample or something." Eleanor looked confused. But this is clearly from their new collection. I just saw it in Vogue last week. Stephanie waved dismissively. I'm sure it's a knockoff. Audrey's always been good at finding bargains. As guests moved to the reception area, I found myself surrounded by several of Mom's friends who seemed genuinely interested in my life and work. Unlike the strained conversations at family gatherings, these women asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to my answers. Your mother mentioned you worked in fashion, said Barbara, who had taught with Mom for years. She always spoke so proudly of your eye for design. Did she? I asked, surprised. Oh, yes, especially in the last few years. She kept fashion magazines in her desk drawer at school. I caught her looking at them during lunch breaks sometimes. This glimpse into Mom's private pride touched me deeply. While I spoke with these women who had known a different side of my mother, I noticed Jessica, Mom's nurse, had arrived. She made her way to me through the crowd. Your mother would have loved this service, she said, hugging me. It feels like her elegant without being showy, meaningful without being sentimental. Thank you for coming, I said. And for everything you did for her. Jessica lowered her voice. I brought something I thought you should have. She handed me a small notebook. Your mother kept this by her bed. She wrote in it on good days when she had enough energy. I slipped it into my jacket pocket, intending to read it privately later. The reception continued a subdued affair with people sharing quiet memories of Mom. I was speaking with one of her former students when a sudden increase in volume drew everyone's attention to the center of the room. Stephanie stood there, glass of wine in hand, speaking loudly to a circle of acquaintances. I mean, look at it, she was saying, gesturing in my direction. So plain and boring. At our mother's funeral of all days, you'd think she could make an effort to wear something with a bit of style. The room quieted as people realized she was talking about me. Several looked uncomfortable, eyes darting between us. I've always tried to help her with her image, Stephanie continued, apparently oblivious to the awkwardness she was creating. But she insists on these basic, forgettable clothes. I guess when you work retail in some obscure boutique, you don't develop much fashion sense. I felt rather than saw several of Mom's fashion-conscious friends exchange glances. One of them had just been complimenting me on my stunning Parker Atelier ensemble minutes earlier. What did you say you do in New York again? Audrey asked, one of Dad's business associates giving me an opportunity to correct Stephanie's narrative. But before I could answer, Stephanie jumped in. Oh, she works in some little shop, helps customers find their size or whatever. She laughed dismissively. Meanwhile, I just closed on a $5 million property last week. We all have different talents, I suppose. The cruelty was so casual, so practiced, that I recognized it as the same pattern from our childhood, Stephanie elevating herself by diminishing me, especially in public settings. It had always worked because I had always stayed silent, too hurt or shocked to respond. Something inside me finally snapped. Not in anger, but in release, like setting down a heavy burden I'd carried for decades. Actually, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the now quiet room, I don't work in a shop. I own a design house. Stephanie rolled her eyes. Oh, please, your little sewing projects hardly count as a design house. Parker Atelier, I said simply. I founded it 5 years ago. There was a beat of silence, then several gasps of recognition around the room. Eleanor Griffin, who had mentioned the waitlist earlier, stared at me open-mouthed. That's not possible. Stephanie sputtered, wine sloshing in her glass. Parker Atelier is a major luxury brand. They have stores in New York and London. 3 stores now, I corrected gently. We just opened in Tokyo last month. Dad approached, confusion evident on his face. What's going on? Audrey is trying to claim she owns some fancy clothing brand, Stephanie said with a forced laugh. Just another one of her fantasies. James, who had been quiet throughout the reception, finally spoke up. "It's not a fantasy, Steph. Audrey really is the founder and creative director of Parker Atelier." Stephanie whirled to face her husband. "What? How would you know that?" "Because, unlike you, I actually looked into it when my sister mentioned working with their team on a magazine shoot. Audrey has built one of the most respected new luxury houses in the industry." His voice was calm but firm. "While you've been telling everyone she's struggling, she's been running a multi-million-dollar global brand." Stephanie's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and then something darker, the same expression she'd had as a child when one of her attempts to sabotage me had failed. "You're lying," she hissed, but her voice lacked conviction as her eyes dropped to the distinctive stitching on my jacket, the same signature detail that appeared in every Parker Atelier piece. Jessica stepped forward, then holding her phone. On the screen was a fashion magazine article featuring Parker Atelier with a small photo of me in the corner. "Your mother kept every article about Audrey's company," she said quietly. She was so proud, even though she was afraid to say it openly. The revelation hung in the air as conversations stopped throughout the room. Stephanie's face flushed red, her composure cracking as the carefully constructed narrative of her superiority publicly unraveled. "If you'll excuse me," I said quietly, "I'd like some air." As I walked toward the exit, I heard Stephanie behind me, her voice shrill with embarrassment turned to aggression. "If that's true, why have you been hiding it? Why pretend to be less successful than you are unless you're ashamed of what you've built?" I turned back, meeting her eyes across the room filled with witnesses. "I never pretended anything, Stephanie. You created a story about my life that made you comfortable, and I simply stopped correcting you." I glanced around at the gathered friends and family. "I think Mom would have preferred we focus on her today rather than on me or my company." It was the most diplomatic response I could manage in the moment, but it clearly wasn't what Stephanie wanted. As I stepped outside into the garden, I knew this wasn't over, that the public revelation had only accelerated the confrontation that had been brewing for decades. The week following Mom's funeral unfolded like the final act of a play long in production. News of my identity as Parker Atelier's founder spread quickly through our hometown social circles, transforming Stephanie's carefully constructed narrative about our respective success. I extended my stay in Massachusetts to handle Mom's affairs, working remotely from my hotel room while fielding curious calls from family acquaintances who suddenly discovered they'd always admired my aesthetic sensibility. 3 days after the funeral, Dad requested to meet for coffee. We sat across from each other at a local diner, the uncomfortable silence between us heavy with unspoken history. "James showed me some articles about your company," he finally said, stirring his coffee with methodical precision. "Quite impressive." "Thank you," I replied, waiting for more. "Why didn't you tell us?" The question came with a hint of accusation. I considered my response carefully. Would it have mattered? He looked up, startled by my directness. "Of course it would have mattered. You built something significant. And if I'd built something small, would that have mattered too?" I asked. Because I tried to share my early successes, design school honors my first industry recognition, and they were dismissed as hobbies and distractions. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "We wanted security for you. The fashion industry is so competitive." "So is real estate," I pointed out. But Stephanie's first commission was celebrated with a family dinner. My first design award wasn't even acknowledged. The conversation paused as the waitress refilled our cups. When she left, Dad's expression had softened somewhat. "I didn't understand your work," he admitted. "I still don't really. But that's not an excuse." He hesitated before adding, "Your mother kept a folder of articles about you. Did you know?" I nodded. "She showed me near the end." "She didn't show me until about a month ago," he said quietly. "She was afraid I'd dismiss it, I think, and she was probably right." He stared into his coffee cup. "I failed you, Audrey. I don't know if that can be fixed, but I'd like to try." It wasn't the dramatic reconciliation of movies, but it was perhaps the most honest conversation we'd ever had. We parted with a tentative plan to have dinner when he visited New York the following month, a small beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. Stephanie predictably took a different approach. The morning after my meeting with Dad, she arrived at my hotel, unannounced, dressed impeccably, and carrying a large portfolio. "We need to talk business," she announced, breezing past me into the room. "I've been thinking about how we can leverage your company's position for mutual benefit." "Mutual benefit," I echoed. She spread marketing materials across the desk, mock-ups featuring her as a brand ambassador for Parker Atelier, a proposal for a sister-designed capsule collection, and even a reality show concept she called Sibling Rivalry from Fallout. "To fashion." "Think about it," she urged, excitement evident in her voice. "The story practically sells itself. Estranged sisters reunite through fashion. I've already spoken to a producer friend who thinks we could get a bidding war going between networks." I stared at the materials, recognizing the familiar pattern, Stephanie finding a way to center herself in my narrative to claim credit by proximity. "This isn't going to happen," I said firmly. "Don't be short-sighted, Audrey. My connections and social media presence could elevate your brand's visibility. You need a face for the company, someone with my kind of polished image. Parker Atelier already has a face, the designs themselves. That's always been our philosophy." I gathered her materials and handed them back. "Our brand stands for authenticity and substance over spectacle. This contradicts everything we've built." Her expression hardened. "So you'd rather keep hiding, or is it that you don't want to share the spotlight?" "There is no spotlight, Stephanie. That's what you've never understood. I built this company to create something meaningful, not to prove anything or become famous." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "I'm proud of what I've created, but I don't need external validation to know its worth. And I certainly don't need to exploit family dynamics for marketing purposes." "You'll regret this," she warned, snatching back her portfolio. "I'm offering you mainstream exposure that design snobs alone can't provide." "Thank you for thinking of me," I said, opening the door. "But the answer is no." After she left, I called Rachel to update her on the situation. She wasn't surprised by Stephanie's approach. "We've had 3 calls from reality TV producers already," she confirmed. "And someone claiming to be your sister's publicist reached out about co-branding opportunities." I sighed. "Decline everything politely. This isn't the direction we want for the brand." Later that afternoon, Jessica, Mom's nurse, who had become a friend, visited me with a small box of Mom's personal effects she'd been holding. "I thought you might want these privately," she explained, handing me several notebooks and a collection of family photos, many featuring me at various ages, often working on design projects. "Your mother talked about you constantly," Jessica revealed as we sorted through the items. "Not just about Parker Atelier, but about who you are as a person. She admired your integrity, your persistence in building something authentic rather than chasing quick fame. I wish she'd told me that while she was stronger," I admitted. "She tried in her way. She kept every article about your company, even the smallest mentions in industry publications." Jessica hesitated before adding, "She also kept a journal during her illness. She asked me to make sure you got it specifically when you were alone." The journal, bound in soft blue leather, contained entries spanning the last year of Mom's life. Many pages were blank days when she'd been too weak to write, but between them were heartfelt reflections on her life regrets and hopes. One entry from 3 months before her death stood out. "Watched Audrey being interviewed on Bloomberg today about Parker Atelier's approach to sustainable luxury. She was poised, articulate, passionate, everything I always knew she could be. Robert was out, and Stephanie doesn't watch boring business channels, as she calls them, so I had this small joy to myself. How strange that I've been reduced to secretly celebrating my daughter's success. This is my failure, not hers. She protected her vision by keeping it from those who couldn't appreciate it, including her own mother, for too long. I hope someday she'll stop hiding her light from the world, even if that means outshining those who have tried to diminish her. Asterisk. Tears blurred my vision as I read her words' confirmation that she had seen me clearly in the end, even if she hadn't been able to express it fully in life. The day before I was scheduled to return to New York, I received one final visitor, James, Stephanie's husband, looking apologetic and uncomfortable. I wanted to apologize for Stephanie's behavior, he began. The reality show thing, the brand ambassador proposals. It was inappropriate. You don't need to apologize for her, I said. I know. But I also wanted to thank you. At my questioning look, he continued, for not exposing the truth at the funeral itself. You could have humiliated Stephanie publicly when she mocked your clothes, but you walked away instead. It was dignified. It would have overshadowed Mom's service, I explained. That day wasn't about me or Stephanie or our issues. James nodded thoughtfully. Stephanie is struggling with the revelation. Her identity has been so wrapped up in being the more successful sister that she doesn't know how to process this shift. I'm not interested in competing with her, I assured him. I never was. I know. That's probably what bothers her most. He smiled sadly. For what it's worth, your mother knew exactly who you are. The last time I drove her to chemo, she made me promise to look out for you. The remarkable one who needs no looking after. She was very proud of you, Audrey. After James left, I packed my belongings and prepared for my return to New York. As I checked out of the hotel the next morning, the manager handed me an envelope that had been delivered a handwritten note from Eleanor Griffin, Mom's oldest friend. Asterisk. Dear Audrey, Margaret shared your secret with me last year, showing me articles about Parker Atelier with such pride in her eyes. She made me promise not to tell a soul, especially Stephanie. Audrey has built something extraordinary without any support from us, she told me. The least I can do is respect how she chooses to share it. Your mother recognized her failures, dear. In her final months, she found the courage she had lacked throughout your childhood. I thought you should know that she did see you truly before the end. Perhaps that knowledge can be part of your healing, too. With affection, Eleanor. Asterisk. Returning to New York and the demands of Parker Atelier provided a welcome return to normality after the emotional intensity of the previous weeks. In my first executive meeting back, Rachel updated me on our latest collection's reception and upcoming strategic decisions. By the way, she added, Vogue wants to do a feature on you personally, the designer behind the brand. I told them I'd ask, but expected you'd decline as usual. I considered the request, remembering Mom's words in her journal about hiding my light. Actually, I said, I think it's time. Tell them yes. 3 months later, as the Vogue issue hit newsstands with my photo and story inside, I established the Margaret Parker Memorial Scholarship for young designers from disadvantaged backgrounds. The announcement received modest industry attention exactly as I'd intended. The first recipient was a talented 19-year-old who reminded me of myself at that age, determined, creative, and lacking family support for her artistic pursuits. When I called to inform her of the scholarship, she burst into tears. This changes everything, she said. No one in my family understands why I want to design. They think it's impractical. Trust your vision, I told her. Success isn't measured by others' recognition, but by creating something authentic to yourself. Dad visited New York as promised, touring our design studio and flagship store with genuine interest. Our relationship remained a work in progress. Decades of patterns couldn't be undone in months, but there was effort on both sides that hadn't existed before. Stephanie and I maintained a cordial distance. After her reality show and collaboration proposals were rejected, she pivoted to posting social media content, highlighting her own success without direct references to me or Parker Atelier. I considered it progress of a sort. 1 year after Mom's funeral, I stood in our Tokyo store watching a customer try on the jacket Stephanie had mocked the same design I'd worn that day. The woman admired its clean lines and perfect fit in the mirror, running her fingers over the fabric with appreciation. "There's something special about this piece," she said to the associate helping her. "It feels purposeful." I smiled to myself, thinking of Mom's journal entry about outshining those who tried to diminish me. The truth was, Parker Atelier had never been about outshining anyone. It had been about creating something with integrity, letting the quality speak for itself without flashy logos or manufactured drama. In honoring that vision, I had ultimately honored the strongest parts of myself, the parts that had survived a childhood of comparison and dismissal, to build something meaningful. And in the end, Mom had seen that strength and found her own in acknowledging it. That, I realized, was the real legacy she had left me, not the ring she'd pressed into my palm in her final days, but the permission to finally, fully claim my own story. Have you ever had a moment when someone underestimated you, only to later discover your true capabilities? Or perhaps you've built something meaningful that others initially dismissed? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more authentic life experiences. And don't forget to share with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength and worth. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, sometimes the most powerful response to those who try to diminish your light is to simply let it shine brighter.